Dr. Greg Cason. Welcome to Off the Couch. This is for psychology for your everyday life. I'm here with my co-host, Zoe Yeoman, who is an etiquette expert and all-around good person. Welcome, Zoe.
Thank you, Dr. Greg. Nice to see you.
It's great to see you again, all healthy and back and shiny and new. I'm glad to see that. And Brian Gomez, producer Brian, who is the backbone.
Happy Monday, you guys. Good to see you.
Thank you. So, hey, you guys, welcome. This has been a busy week in psychology. I thought it would be a slow week. I mean, who cares? All this other stuff is going on in the world, and yet there were 1 million studies released. I had to narrow it down, and it was very, very difficult. Even so, I picked a couple that weren't from this week, but let's just dive in. So this week in psychology, boom. What do you think? Do feminists hate men? Do feminists hate men? You know, this was a big thing back, I don't know, for years we've been hearing that, really, since I've been coming up, and Gloria Steinem and people saying, feminists are anti-man. And really, this was a big question, but they actually looked into this very in-depth. And this is out of a journal article published in the Psychology of Women Weekly. And this study was done by the University of Surrey, and it measured 10,000 or nearly 10,000 participants, not quite 10,000, but close there. And the goal of the study was to assess the stereotype that feminists harbor negative attitudes toward men. And when we're talking about feminism, just so people know, feminism is defined as the movement to end sexism, oppression, and to achieve gender equality. So the people who would ascribe themselves as members of that movement could be men as well, but we're looking at women in this study. What do you guys think? Or did you already read ahead? What do you guys think?
I'll let Brian go first. I don't hate men.
I haven't read this article yet, but me as a man, I hate men. So I don't blame them at this point. I would jump in on that team. So I kind of hate that I'm a man, you know.
I don't even know what to say.
It's a biased opinion on
fully identify as one of those things you hate, but that's life.
I love men because I need them to open the pickle jar. I need to rake the leaves. I need them to fix my car. Although I did have a female mechanic for a while, and I adored her, and everybody adored her. She's very talented. She actually had her own TV garage thing or whatever. You know who she is. But no, I don't hate men. Quite the opposite.
Well, this is an interesting thing. I'm glad to hear that. You don't hate men, Zoe, but Brian does. We'll have to come back to that one later. This was an interesting thing because the perception is that feminists are anti-men or hate men. So this was actually kind of cool. They looked at 5 different studies, 9,799 participants. It spanned Italy, Poland, the United States, UK, United Kingdom, China, India, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan. And what did they find across all of these countries when they did studies with all of these people? And they looked at the 5 studies and they did a meta-analysis and they smashed all the data together. They found that there were no differences in attitude toward men of people who either ascribe themselves as feminists or people who didn't ascribe themselves as feminists. And I thought this was especially interesting because we've been getting brainwashed. Well, I mean, I'm not brainwashed, but I remember there was a radio broadcaster here for the last, God knows, 20 years. He was like the #1 radio broadcaster before he passed away, and his name was Rush Limbaugh, and he would call feminists feminazis. And we would hear this repeated on all kinds of television shows, and always saying how awful these people are toward men. And this actually was interesting because the perception that women or feminists are anti-men or hate men actually causes women to not want to join or look into the feminist movement, number one. And it causes men, even worse, to want to sometimes oppose women who are members of the feminist movement, and sometimes violently, and has been ascribed to some kinds of hate crime against people who are female. So I think this was actually a very, very important study. I was actually kind of excited to see this study because it knocks down this kind of really insidious and negative perception that people have used to justify negative actions in the past.
Well, I think it's just rude when a man opens a door for a woman and she refuses to say thank you.
I think it's rude when anyone opens the door and refuses to say thank you.
And by the way,
yeah.
I mean, you know, to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, I think that men and boys have been treated pretty badly in lots of different ways, and part of that is because of women who think they should be treated thusly. You know, they've been so oppressive. Well, if somebody personally hasn't oppressed you, then stop lumping them all together. But I do feel, I know what Brian's talking about. I've worked with and for a lot of men, and yeah, you guys can be pains in the butt, that's for sure.
Well, I'm going to go with, you know, as a psychologist, I would advocate that you not look at the group, but you look at the individual behavior. And so if someone doesn't open the door, if someone opens the door for you and the other person doesn't say thank you, that is an individually rude behavior. And it's okay to have a negative feeling toward that person for their rude behavior. We're going to talk about gratitude a little while longer, and not in that kind of corny way that I always hear happening around this time of year, but in an actual productive way. But really, it's, you know, it's okay to look at the individual behavior. What we don't want to look at is the group. And that may be the theme of this show, although I didn't mean it to be. It's certainly one to look at. Really, what I was looking at for this segment was, wow, there were some cool studies out about women this week. Here's another one. This was done by North China University, the Science and Technology School of the School of Psychology and Mental Health. That is, it's just a lot. The University of Science and Technology, School of Psychology and Mental Health. My goodness. Okay, so the study was published in the Journal of Neuroscience, which is a good journal, another good journal. So we like to sit up and pay attention when we see this. 52 women competed against male and female strangers and romantic partners, and the study specifically looked at how competitive they were. How competitive women are. I think we tend to have also a stereotype about women, that women are more cooperative than competitive, and men seem to be more competitive. What do you guys think? If you probably already know where I'm going with this, because here I am talking about stereotypes, but what do you think? Are women competitive?
What do you think, Zoe?
I'll answer this for Brian.
Oh, I mean, I feel like
he's the one with the negative attitude.
I know, I am. But I feel like men are a bit more competitive when it comes to it. Generally, I feel like it's a more competitive. I'm very competitive in that sense, so I can vouch for that one.
So am I.
And I tend to be more cooperative, and one day we'll talk about my personal psychology. I think I can be very, very competitive, but there's something that in me that also clicks on to be more cooperative. I will tell you, and that probably shouldn't admit that because no one likes a cooperative person these days. Everyone seems to hold the competitive on the stool, whatever, they hold them up. Anyway, the thing that was so interesting about this study is they found that when women were pitted against either women or men, the women were vigorously competitive. They were not cooperative. They were vigorously competitive. But when they were paired with their mate, they were not as competitive.
So they were more agreeable.
More cooperative when they're with their romantic partner. But here's the twist. When they were paired with their romantic partner and they were more cooperative, guess who won the game usually? Either one? No? Okay, it's the women. The women won the game, even though they were being cooperative. Why might that be? because we're seeing the effect on the other side, that the men will tend to give up. And this is called mate retention behavior, that, the happy wife, happy life philosophy.
I like that.
That-
Shouldn't be.
As it should be.
that when the women, when the mate, the female mate, and this is looking at heterosexual couples, obviously, when the female mate is paired with her male counterpart, she tends to back off, but then so does the man. So they tend to be less competitive with each other, and the women will win the games overall. I thought it was kind of a fun study, that one.
That's very sweet.
And here's a really cool one that I think has longer ranging implications that we can see. This was actually a dissertation. And I won't always quote a dissertation, but sometimes a dissertation, which is the final cap of someone's research in their PhD, which is often the most major piece of research most people do during their PhD program. But then afterward, they can go on for a whole career in research. But up until that point, this is the biggie. And this is usually a major research study they've taken on themselves. And this particular woman did a study, and this was at the Lund University, L-U-N-D University in Sweden. And this basically found that men felt less pain when a woman is in charge. How about that? So when a woman is in charge in a medical setting, men feel less pain. And they did this kind of cool study. They first took laser lights and they zapped the bottoms of their feet, and they had the women and the men dressed alike, and they had them keep to a script, and they gave them this laser light zap in their foot, which was painful, and then they had them rate the pain. And then they found that the men experienced less pain when the women were giving the shot, even though it was exactly the same thing. And then they replicated it a totally different way. They gave them electric shots to their hand, but the men could let go of the plunger so that they didn't have any more pain, and that basically reaching their pain threshold, and the men could hold on to a longer pain threshold with women administering the test than men. Fascinating.
That makes sense, though. I mean, I feel like as a guy, you want to show off like you're not weak, and that the pain in front of a woman, you're not going to be like, you're going to take as much beating as you can until you've reached that I'm not weak kind of stage. That's my thought of it.
Cool.
Right.
I think that I would probably feel similarly if a man was testing me versus that a woman was testing me. If it's a woman testing me, I'm going to think it's going to hurt more. But that's because I'm a woman. So, whereas if it's the guy testing me, it should hurt less, because he doesn't want to hurt a woman.
No. But in other studies, it's actually found that women will feel less pain with a woman applying something than a man. So, I mean, there have been other kinds of similar studies in the past. So it does look like there is some kind of effect. What was missing from this study is to do it blindly, to put the feet through behind a sheet and have the person doing it, and you don't know if it's a man or a woman back there.
Well, I have zero tolerance for pain. Zero. So I'd be giving up all the codes and all the times and all of you don't have to touch me. I will tell you. What do you want to know?
When I was a student at UCLA, I volunteered to participate in a dental pain study. I probably got paid $20 or something, but you're desperate for any penny back then. So I participated in this study, and I remember the grad student, who was this beautiful dental grad student, and she was administering the study, and she goes, "Why did you sign up for this study? We had such trouble getting people for this." And I'm like, "Really?" And it did hurt, by the way. But she was so amazing. The point of that being, she was so amazing and so sweet. I don't know if I felt less pain, but I really loved. I had to go in there a few times, and I thought, she was just such a wonderful person to be with. So
nice.
There was something about that. I have no idea where she is now. But they actually did. What's interesting too is when they didn't have the woman administering the pain, the electric shot or the shock or the Pulse of Light, they had women versus men interviewing people post-surgery. You know, when you're coming out of surgery and you're in pain, they had them interview them about their pain. And again, men said they felt less pain than when the women were asking, or more pain when the men, whatever. Men felt less pain than when the men were asking versus the women. Did I say that right? Oh my God. Anyway, it duplicated the study. But it was a weak association, which means that, you know, on further study, it might not show to be true.
It might not hold up.
It might not hold up. Might not hold up.
Pass muster.
No. So let's go on to the next one. Seems like we're heading into the holiday season, and the holiday season is a busy one. What's it busy for? Eating and drinking. And so here, this was a cool study. It wasn't a study, it was a survey. It's done by SAMHSA. And I used to participate in this study years ago when I worked for the UCLA Drug Abuse Research Group, which is now called the Substance Abuse Center. I don't know. They changed the name. But anyway, 1 in 6 Americans suffer from a substance use disorder. That was in 2022. 1 in 6 Americans. That's an amazing amount. SAMHSA stands for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They estimate that 30 million people in the United States suffer from an alcohol use disorder. 27 million people in the United States suffer from a drug use disorder, and 8 million have both. They're what we call polydrug, basically. They like to have many things. And there are, just for context, there are 330 million people total, including children in the United States. All this did was look at teens and adults, obviously. So what they also looked at was mental health disorders. During that year, they found that about 1 in 4, 25% of Americans had a diagnosable or reported mental health disorder that they may meet criteria for. And 1 in 12 Americans have both a mental health disorder and a substance abuse disorder. You don't have to know these statistics except to know it's a lot. Like if you walk into a room, if you go into your family dinner, let's say at the holiday, there are some people that are going to probably have substance abuse and or mental health disorders, and not everyone's going to be obvious to you. So it's good to have sensitivity about these subjects when we face these situations. And if you look to the left and look to the right and it's not one of them, it may be you, and it might be a good thing to consider as well. So there you go. Any thoughts on that, guys?
I mean, it makes sense. The past few years have been kind of crazy. And if people don't have therapy, they're turning to something. I mean, not the best, and not saying it's a good thing, but it makes sense. The studies make sense with what's happening in the world.
Yeah. No, I think this is a really good point you're making. And we even look at adolescents, and we're estimating about 1 in 5 adolescents during that year had major depressive disorder. And what we also know is, although we're trying to make mental health more accessible, it's just not accessible to a large number of people. And that is due to plain old funding, and there are some political winds that push against it. Although we see, like, the president puts out all this stuff, we want, mental health funding, the Congress will push back and say, oh, we can't find a penny for it, and if it doesn't come from that, it's not going to come from the insurance organizations, because they try to make things as little as possible. So it's just,
but they can send $14 billion to the Ukraine. But anyway, sometimes it's because people won't cop to the fact that they have a problem. You can't help somebody unless they admit that there's something wrong, right? So they might not know that there's something wrong. They might not believe, or for any number of reasons, religious or otherwise, that they shouldn't talk to someone. Like, there's a big stigma around this,
Yeah, in fact, stigma is one of the biggest issues, and we see that issue actually creating quite big problems, and we see a majority or a large number of what we call deaths of despair, where people die for reasons other than a disease, and they die for what we call a behavioral health reason. often from eating too much, drinking too much, opioid abuse, depression. So they have they suicide. There can be many reasons for this, deaths of despair, but we're definitely seeing some big problems happen. And we're seeing the biggest problems happen in communities where there is a large stigma, typically the Bible Belt in the middle of the United States, and more conservative places where they look upon mental health or mental health issues as a weakness rather than just a condition that we all deal with. We all have brains, so our brain can have an issue. We all have disorders, and we all do things so we can have a behavioral problem. So, I mean, this is just, we're not going to be perfect and on the track the whole time. And I think part of our whole things, I hate to be corny, but you remember that old saying, which I always hated, we're not human doings, we're human beings, whatever that is. Well, the fact is, we do a lot, so sometimes we need to look at the doings as well.
Well, Rosalind Carter just died, right? She was a big proponent for mental health. And this is one of the things that they're lauding, as one of her legacies. And how long has that been? Not that long ago.
No, so that was the 70s, 76 through 80, yeah.
Only just now becoming a thing that people will talk about and will cop to, and to recognize things in their family members, for example, right?
No, I think this is really key, what you're saying. Rosalind Carter did amazing work to try to erase the stigma and raise awareness around mental health issues. When no one in government was talking about these things, she brought it out. And her predecessor, Betty Ford, really, in many ways, I feel like was the biggest trailblazer, because she, really came clean with her alcohol addiction, and she also breast cancer, I think she had to deal with. And so she brought out these typically hidden and stigmatized issues and made them public. And I think this is incredible when people do that, especially people in those positions. And we can go down, we can talk first ladies, but they often bring tremendous, a lot of tremendous work and awareness to the United States that they aren't credited for. And I'm glad you mentioned Rosalind Carter.
Women can be very brave and in talking about a lot of things that aren't just women, female women's issues. Women can be very brave in this regard. And I dare say, had I known more about mental illness, which I didn't know anything about it, really, people in my family might still be alive. We just didn't talk about things.
Yeah.
So you're right. Betty Ford, Rosalind Carter, just trailblazers. Important.
Absolutely important. And we can look down the line. I mean, we keep making these stepwise progress to a better world, and I think this is just very important. And being able to teach things at younger ages, to give people skills, to teach them how to handle things, teach them how to be together, especially in this day and age when I think a lot of people are getting misled by a lot of peer influence that can be negative. But then, that happened in our time too, I suppose, is peer influence. But we can talk about peer influence. But I found another study. This is from this week as well. I thought this was so cool. So this was a study out of the Communication Neuroscience Lab at the University of Pennsylvania. This is one of the top schools in the nation, an Ivy League school. They paired up too, not pair, multiplied up with McGill, Temple University, Brigham Young University, Columbia University, and Dartmouth. So we're talking a multi-site study with college kids at some of the biggest universities in the United States, and they're some of the most elite. What was interesting is they were trying to find, is there a way we can help people? Because when you're in college, I mean, I don't know, this was my experience, you're in college and you basically think of two things, your next test and where you're going to get your next drink. I mean, I don't know, but people think about those things. And so you're just kind of going through college and you're like, oh, I'm going to go to a party tonight and a party tomorrow night, and then I got to go out to the parties on, then we have the big football game, and then there'll be more parties. So that's just a normal part of these big schools, at least. I don't think as much in the small schools. And so they're trying to come up with a way for people to not drink as much. And that's a really tough thing to do. So they actually came up with something I think is really cool, is they tried to teach them little techniques to do when they're confronted with triggers for drinking. And they taught them 3 basic things. One is to, they're calling them psychological distancing techniques. And the one is mindfulness. And with mindfulness, they asked them to observe this situation in an impartial and non-judgmental and curious way. Then they would send them a text. So if the people were in the mindfulness group, they get the following text. If you're around alcohol today, react mindfully. Notice, acknowledge, and accept the thoughts and feelings you have. They also said, well, we can't just give them mindfulness, something else could work. So they split another group off into something called perception taking. Perspective taking. That's trying to take another person's perspective. And that perspective taking considers how someone else would react in the same situation. And they would send them this script. If you're around alcohol today, imagine how name would react. And so the name would be the person that they identify, that they want to model behavior after. And it's usually, this goes to social learning theory, we're looking for a model of behavior to copy behavior from. And we found this to be an extremely powerful way of learning. So if we can look at how someone else does it, maybe someone who drinks less than us, then we can kind of model those skills and react to those. So this says, if you're around alcohol today, imagine how that person would react. Try to imagine the feelings and thoughts that person would have. And then they had a third group. They had to have a control group. So they had a third group that actually, their text, they were the react naturally group. And theirs was basically have whatever thoughts and feelings you would normally have today if you're around alcohol. So that group got just do what you do. They got that instruction. They actually found something really cool. I don't think it's much of a surprise. This actually got published, is that the people who got those messages drank less frequently, but when they drank the same as other people. So bottom line is, if they could keep away from that first drink, they were able to not drink. They were able to not engage in drinking. So they could actually go into a situation, let's say you're in your dorm. Somebody goes, hey, you want a beer? We're all having beer. Here's a beer, or here's, marijuana, whatever. And then you go, you follow your script, I'm going to notice these thoughts and feelings. I may have a desire for this right now, but I'm just going to notice that and step back from it. And that pause might help me to say no, or to imagine someone who knows how to do it to say no in that particular instance. But if I take the toke or I have the sip of beer, then all bets are off. I might be going and drinking more. So, yes.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I don't usually drink. I'm not a drinker, but I used to drink a lot when I was younger. In my early 20s, I was partying a little bit. And I've never liked drinking. I never enjoyed the taste of drink. It was just because my friends would be out drinking and I would just tag along with it, So I think that's cool that things like that are around now, because it would have been nice to have a little support to be like, hey, you don't have to drink. You don't like the taste. This is horrible. You're going to throw up at the end of the night or black out, that it's having that little support when you're younger, I think would make such a difference,
Yeah, I agree.
And, I always did like that taste of alcohol, so I will employ this and try to imagine Brian not drinking.
But I do got to say, when I do drink now, I will drink the same way I would drink if I was regularly drinking, as bad as that sounds. So I don't drink, but when I do drink, I do drink.
But I think this goes to, there's a saying in AA that I really like, and it really goes to this. For those who have difficulty managing the amount they drink, that a one drink is too many and 1,000 is not enough. So I think we've got to look at that a little more skeptically to say, there are those who just can't it's going to put them over. And so sobriety really is the best pathway for that. There are those who are able to moderate, lucky them, and then there are those who are natural teetotalers. We can go into research about those two groups, the indulgent group, if you will, and the teetotaler group. They often have similar upbringings, which is really fascinating. So the moderation group tend to have the more diverse, like they're kind of in the middle people. So it's kind of fascinating. Yeah. Let's make a hard right turn to some good news, you guys. Good news. This is a study that Brian found, and actually it was from October 31st. So it was a couple weeks ago, but it's such an important study and so relevant to today and our time of year. Gratitude may buffer negative consequences of stress and overall performance. Gratitude. And I said we'd talk about gratitude, and whenever I hear people doing their like gratitude journals and rehearsing gratitude every day and doing Stuart Smalley thank yous in the mirrors, I don't dissuade people, but I think I need to operationalize this a little bit better, and I think there's another study that kind of did a little bit more. But what this looked at was something called trait gratitude. So this is more of a tendency to have gratitude. It's not just in the moment, like in those particular circumstances. These are people who developed it over time and kind of walk around in a more a gratitude state. They found they looked at 912 participants, by the way. This is published in the Journal of Biological Society. They looked at 660,000 people. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is, they're saying, I'll tell you, they looked 912 participants, 35 to 86 years old. 32.9% of those people had high blood pressure, aka hypertension. 9.6% of those people had diabetes. They assessed them once, and then they assessed them in 6.7 years later. So this is what we might call a longitudinal study. It looked over time to see if there was a difference. They assessed them about their health status, and they looked specifically at people who had myocardial infarction, which is also known as a heart attack. So they found the greater the disposition to appreciate what is good in the world, the lower the likelihood of suffering a myocardial infarction or heart attack. The greater the disposition to appreciate what is good in the world. I thought this was incredible.
That's positivity, right?
It is positivity, but it's like looking around and seeing this was, there are good things here, and I find this really incredible. The Journal of Biological Psychology, I said, and I also was saying the 660,000 amount. That's how many people die of a heart attack every year. 660,000 people. It's always in the top 10 deaths.
Yeah.
1 in 7 deaths are due to this disease. And who did this study? Well, I love this. The University of Maynooth and the University of Limerick in Ireland. So thank you to our Irish brothers and sisters for doing that.
And I love that you bring this up just because, like I'm Dr. Greg, I'm not so positive and like cheesy with the gratitude thing. But I am always so grateful. Like yesterday, I went to Venice and it was windy and crazy sandy. But like the sunset was so beautiful that I enjoy every sunset that I can watch. It's like simple little things like that I'm just so grateful. And it feels nice. Like it genuinely feels nice when you think about how your body holds the stress from like your everyday life, your work, your relationships and everything. And then you compare to how you feel when you're like, I'm just grateful for this moment or for having this roof over my head or even having this conversation with you guys, which just feels good, it kind of releases and soothes your body a little bit.
I think that is so important, and that living in gratitude, I'm grateful that I can get into the bathtub so I can clean the bathtub, because how many people can't get into the bathtub to clean their bathtub? So even in the things that I don't like to do, I will stop. And instead of being in a place of grousing about it, I will really, really, really try to find the good in it and be grateful for that awful whatever thing that I have to deal with.
Wow, I love that though. I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna use that one next.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I'm guilty of not paying attention to things. It's very funny at my work. I often feel grateful. Like I really love my clients and feel grateful for them. As bizarre as that sounds, because people always
No, it's
ask me.
because you're helping them.
Oh, I
and
love it. I love it.
helping you
Yeah.
feels good.
And I hear people, they'll say, how can you sit around and listen to problems all day? And I'll be like, but I don't listen to problems all day. I'm helping them to better their lives. I mean, it feels like I'm participating in the cure, not the problem.
Something happened to me recently, and it worked out. Like I don't remember now what the exact thing, but it worked out. And I remember thinking about it again a couple of days later, and I happened to be in front of the mirror. I don't know if I was brushing my teeth or what I was doing, but it dawned on me that I hadn't said thank you. Oh. And so I stopped in that moment and I looked up and I said, for whatever, just thank you. Thank you for that.
I love that because I tend to say the same thing when things don't work out for me. I'm like, it's for a reason, whatever that reason may be. And I may be pissed or just hating the entire day that day, but it's for a reason. And I feel like those actually do help us, process things easier and move on from them.
So, Dr. Greg,
yeah.
Live in gratitude.
Oh, I feel like I generally do. I feel pretty lucky, honestly.
Okay.
But I've always been one of those people. I think we can go into my personal psychology as well.
Can we do that next week?
We can do it maybe in about a month or a year or so, maybe two. Because I'm not quiet about this, but I was raised with a different perspective. And I think sometimes when you're raised with a perspective that, things are difficult, things are not easy, that, we can't always rely on things. You grow up thinking, okay, this is going to be kind of a tough world. And I do feel like I'm always going back and thinking, I grew up very, working class. And the one thing that was really interesting to me is that I always look back on like my college education, which made me who I am today. And I am so thankful to the University of California and that I got I got to go to a state school, a really good one. I went to a great high school. I went to a great elementary school. I was in a program. I had to be bused across town 45 minutes each way. It was awful. I had to walk to my bus stop half an hour, and then I took this 45-minute bus. It was it was like my whole day was commuting.
Wow.
But it was a great elementary school that really prepared me, and this was a public school as well. And then it was like one of those magnet schools. They didn't call it back then, but that's what it was. And then then I worked for UCLA, and UCLA gave me a scholarship to go somewhere else for a master's degree to improve myself. And I went to the state school, Cal State Northridge, which had the #1 psych master's program. And then I went to University of Houston. And then I went to University of Texas at Austin. Then I went to UCLA. So I'm trying to say, but all of these are state schools, all of them publicly funded. I felt incredibly grateful. I still had to come out with loans, but not as much as I would have had I gone to any of those private schools. So it was a privilege, and I will often think back on how lucky I was to have gotten that the whole way through.
And say thank you.
So thank you. Yes, thank you, educators. I love you.
Look at you growing already.
And I live in this tiny house that's falling apart, and I still feel grateful for it. And I've lived there 19 years. So
I've seen that house. It's actually really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, when you live in a place, you see the cracks and the leaks and this and that.
Yeah,
but yeah.
It's a home ownership.
A homeowner. Okay, so let's talk about, we're going to talk more about gratitude. I said gratitude, I saw some operational, and this is so interesting. This looks at something called direct reciprocity, and I'm going to go quickly here just because of time. That children naturally hold grudges, but they have to be taught gratitude. How are they taught gratitude? So kids are naturally eye for an eye people, and they did this great study, and I could go into it, but the bottom line is kids always remembered who wronged them. They would want to wrong that person later. They'd come back to it. They also remember the person who did them a favor, but they wouldn't necessarily repay the favor. And this is looking at kids 4 to 5, and then they looked at 7 to 8 years old. And the 7 to 8 year olds started to get with the program a bit and started to give back a little bit. And the difference seemed to be that what they did in the kids 7 to 8 is they kind of directed them a little bit, like, who are you going to give that, pencil to? Now, I don't think it was a pencil. That's a different study. But who are you going to give that pencil to? And they said, oh, I'll give it to, and then that prompt would have them think, oh, I need to give it to the person who gave it to me in the first place, like, to repay the favor type of thing. So
yeah, I think sometimes they do need to be taught how to be nice.
And that's just good parenting right there. And you don't have to beat them over the head, but you guide them gently.
What do you say?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that was just a very cool thing to me. And that children, like adults, tend to underestimate their welcome random acts of kindness. Sorry to hit on so many studies. This was another great one. This was from July of this year. But my goodness, it all fits. Sometimes we don't do those good things for other people because we think others won't appreciate it, or they might even be bugged by it. So this
Strangers.
I'm sorry?
For strangers. Yeah. I had that happen last night. This lady made a big deal about how beautiful blah, blah. And I was just it was very sweet. And then when I left, I said, thank you so much. You made my day. I needed that today, So that was definitely an RAK, a random act of kindness.
Aw. I think this is why we hold back on giving compliments. In fact, there are earlier studies to show that. And I'm one of those people who likes to give compliments. It's like the gift that doesn't cost anything. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to give somebody a compliment. But I found myself holding back because I'm not sure if the person would appreciate it.
I appreciated it, and then she said, and I'm not gay. And I'm like, how the hell would you say that?
That goes to our twisted world we live in today.
Yeah, you just gave me a really nice compliment. It's okay, but that is to your point, though, Dr. Greg. Like, she was feeling a little weird about it after, right?
No, that makes sense, because you never know if somebody's going to accept it or, react a certain way, and that's what she was, I'm pretty sure, preparing for in that sense. But I love that. Like, I have the same interactions at the gym, too, where it's like, sometimes these are people you see constantly, especially if you're going daily, they become kind of like family that you kind of have to say hello or say something nice, it makes your day feel better.
Mm-hmm. Let them deal with the weirdness. You're not the weird one by giving a compliment.
Exactly.
There you go. This was in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, July of 2023, in case anyone wants to look this up. I just thought this was wonderful. They looked at kids and adults, and that was the pencil one, where they were giving a pencil and then giving it back to people, and giving 2 pencils and saying you can give one to somebody, and they measured the reactions. They measured the reactions of being given the pencil or giving away the pencil. Bottom line is, when you give a compliment, when you give a random act of kindness, you feel better. When you receive a random act of kindness, you feel better. It's a win-win. So there you go.
You can't get rid of it once you start passing it around, I feel like. It's one of the good ones.
So I wanted to talk about a study, psychology in the news, which I'm looking at the time, and we're really pressed. So I'm going to skip this because I can come back to this. But the bottom line is, we have a world that is very problematic. And what I was going to go into here was, there were 3 different articles this week about discrimination and hate speech, and people getting hurt, anti-Semitic, anti-Arabic, anti-gender identity. I mean, just some really heinous things that have been happening. And we even got to the 1-year anniversary of the Club Q in Colorado, the mass shooting there, and the community having to deal with all of that. So, and there's a lot of hate speech going around, and I wanted to talk about the psychological impacts of that, which I will come back to, because I think that's going to be one we need to start paying attention to. But to all of that to say, I want to segue into this next piece, because Brian had something really interesting that we want to pose to you, Zoe.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we figured you'd be the perfect one to have this conversation with. I mean, we're all about to celebrate the holidays, whether we're staying here or traveling to see family. And, you know, when family gatherings happen, not everybody has the same opinion or point of view on, like, political things or the world climate we're in right now. You know, it's like, how do you go into that family setting without stirring the pot or causing waves, you know?
Very carefully.
Right? Because I feel like there's always either somebody that wants to stir the pot or just, you know.
Always. Yeah. Just don't take the bait. Don't
take
fall
the
for
bait.
it.
And don't be the person who starts it. Everybody can talk. You don't have to open your mouth. You can just sit there. Well, what do you think, Brian? Oh, I see both of your points. I think they're both really good points. Close it.
No sides to
Stay
pick.
safe. That's the way to stay safe. So, you know, just you don't have to get into it. You really don't. You can just say, oh, you know what? I need more soda, wine, whatever it is. And excuse me, and leave the room.
Distract. I love it.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's
diplomacy first.
Diplomacy first, and I totally agree. And sometimes it's just good for us to pay attention to. Some people will not allow diplomacy, so when they push, what can you do?
Refuse to be pushed.
Okay. Right on.
Like, I am enjoying my meal. I'm enjoying the evening. I'm having such a good time. Let me go see if I can help mom in the kitchen.
So kind of keep it unbothered in
Yeah.
that way. Cool. Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like you feed into their crazy whenever, you know, you respond. The reaction is what they're trying to get out of you. So when you don't give them, it's like a baby. You just ignore the baby crying.
You ignore that baby.
Got it.
I think, and we probably want to talk more about how to deal with problematic people. I certainly think you can say something to somebody like, "Oh, I get where you're coming from." Like it's okay to say, "Oh, I hear you, but I don't want to talk about this right now." Or I need to do something else. Or if you do want to talk about it, hey, let's talk about it when it's not a family gathering, just the two of us.
Or let's talk about it tomorrow. Can I call you tomorrow?
Yeah.
Just get out, just get away from it. Just get away from it, because sometimes even if you say, I don't want to talk about that right now, then you get the, well, what's the matter?
Especially if they're drunk. Right.
Yeah, it can escalate really fast.
But it's good for you to stay cool, to try and use that mindful approach we talked about earlier, being concise, specific, showing consideration of their perspective. But some people like to pick fights, and that's something I never grew up with, so I'm unfamiliar with that. My family was very problematic in many ways, but on holidays we were flawless. Like, everyone just got along. So I don't know. I know that some people have to deal with that on holidays, and just it's about navigating those difficult waters. Don't give in.
No, don't go there. You don't have to.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Yeah, and don't try to change someone's mind. It's really not going to happen, especially if someone brings up something. They're digging their heels in before they get to you. So just, show them what a rational person looks like, and someone who does not want to push buttons and engage, and you can have a rational discussion another time.
Yeah. Go sit down and watch the football game.
Watch football or
and eat some food.
Eat a lot of
food.
Eat a lot of food.
There's like 100 ways to leave the problem.
By the way, eating is one of the best ways to calm you down and make you feel better.
Amen. What are we wearing next week? I want to know.
We need a
we
color.
all wore gray today. I don't know. We'll have to coordinate. We'll see. We'll see if our psychic connection puts it all together.
We'll send a memo out.
All right, you guys are awesome.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, and thank you, Brian. Hey, this is Dr. Greg, Zoe, and Brian bidding you farewell until next time. Be present, be flexible, be kind, and let's all hang in there together until one more week. See you then.
See you next week.
Bye.